I'm I'm Willa Taylor. My pronouns are she, her, and I want to thank Eric for the gracious invitation to allow us to speak to you today. And just want to say how thrilled I am that all of you have chosen to come and hear about the project. This project, Civic Imagination Stations, has been especially important to me because my mother was a librarian and I have had a love of libraries and librarians my whole life. I don't think that I would be the person that I am right now if my mom had not been a library. I spent some of my best memories are the summers in August before school started when I would go to the library with my mother. She was a school librarian. I would go to the library with my mother and help her decorate. And she loved so much creating a welcoming atmosphere for all of the students and other teachers in the school in her library. And then she would let me pick out any book that I wanted, and we would read those every night before I went to bed. And that those memories stay with me, and it is why I was so excited to think about how libraries can become so central to the process of maintaining and creating democracies here. Of course, I didn't do this work alone. I did it with my good friend and great partner, Michael Rohd.
Thank you, Willa. That was so elegantly done. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Michael Rohd. My pronouns are he, him, his. Eric and ITAC, thank you very much for inviting Willa and I here. We're really happy to be here. And it's really thrilling to be here in this Zoom room with folks from so many places who have an interest in this work and have a teaching artistry of their own. It's really exciting. Um, and I'm going to take a moment. Willa shared that sort of origin story for herself and her kind of relationship to libraries, which was very much part of the way we came to this work. And I must throw back the kind words Willa said. I have been very fortunate for the last 12 or 14 years to be collaborating with my good friend and brilliant colleague Willa on a variety of projects, which include Civic Imagination Stations, a partnership with American Library Association. And I'm going to sort of tell you really briefly kind of what that program is, if you haven't sort of seen anything about it online. And then we're not going to do a lot of, this is not like a lecture today. So I'm going to give you a little context, and then we're going to propose a prompt, and we're going to use the chat together, and then we're going to do some work on breakout rooms and come back, and then breakout rooms. So we're going to do some stuff together as a way of us thinking with you about this practice. Tracy Hall, who some of you might know, and if you don't, you should Google her. She was the executive director of the American Library Association, but she has held sort of amazing roles in philanthropy and community development in library world. When she became executive director, she reached out to Willa and I because she knew about some of the work we had been doing in Chicago at the intersection of arts, participatory democracy, and community development. She knew about a project of ours. And she said, I'd love to bring arts and culture more thoughtfully and in a more integrated way into library world. Will you brainstorm with me? So we spent time brainstorming with her, and ultimately what we came up with was a pilot program. And she and her team got a grant from the Estée Lauder Writing Change Foundation, which is, of course, Estée Lauder, their foundation. And it was a project being led by Amanda Gorman, the poet laureate, who gave that beautiful poem at an inauguration some years ago. So Amanda was the leader of the Estée Lauder's kind of initiative, and we were one of 5 national things around the country that got funding for kind of arts-based interventions at the community level. And ours was the Civic Imagination Stations pilot program. And basically the idea was, what if we were to create a learning cohort with sites around the United States where a librarian would partner with a local artist to build not like just a piece of art, but to build an arts-based program that would connect community to library with a focus on building relationships and a focus on exploring all the different ways that we consider notions of literacy. Because literacy, of course, is a primary concern of libraries, but not just literacy in terms of learning to read and write, multiple literacies, economic literacy, civic literacy, recreational literacy, health literacy. So we were invited to build sort of a curriculum through which we would take this cohort of what ended up being a dozen site teams, yeah, a dozen librarians and a dozen artists located around the United States, small rural libraries, really large urban libraries. So everything from like Chicago to like a small community in Maine to a small community in West Virginia. And we got to spend like a year sort of first leading them through virtual workshops and then actually helping them ideate a project and then offering them mentorship and coaching through the project that they did on the ground in their home community at that library, and then helping them document it. And I believe that something that Eric put in the link there was in the chat was a link to a description of the program in greater detail. But more importantly, Willa and I, along with our collaborator, Sarah Sawicki, wrote what we think is a really decent resource. It's a process map, basically, that takes you through the process of how a non-arts partner like a library can partner with a local artist and work for community development at the local level and create and support and implement a project. So that's what that process map exists for. It's free, it's online, it was pushed out to every librarian in the United States of America last fall. And that's a resource, for you. And at the end of today's session, we'll talk about the next round that we're working on this project. But for today, Willa, should I sort of start with the first prompt now and
Yeah.
move into that? Okay. So, the title that we came up with for today's session, Eric, remind me, it's libraries. Can libraries save? So what is the title?
Title is Democracy's Secret Weapon.
Yeah, that's right. So democracy's secret weapon, which we believe that libraries are indeed powerful kind of agents on the front lines in a variety of ways in battles for sort of equitable functional democracy. And one way we wanted to sort of go through a tiny mini version of a process that we led those cohorts through, those site teams, was we wanted to start by asking you to use the chat and maybe respond to this prompt, which I'm gonna put in the chat. I gotta find it for myself. But basically, and what's really exciting is we're here from all over the world. So even notions of democracy mean different things in our different places. Willa and I, and some of us are sort of here in the craziness, the dumpster fire of the United States in relation to notions of democracy.
Oh my God, yes.
But we're all over on this Zoom call. So could I ask you to put in the chat, what are some challenges you see the community or place you are facing in relation to democracy? What are challenges that we face in the communities where we are in relation to democracy? And let's just put some of those challenges in the chat. And that's the first step of what we're going to do here.
One of the things that's exciting to me about being here with you all today is the fact that we are from all over. And so our notions of democracy and what that means and the challenges to it are very different depending on where you live. Even within the United States, of course, we have a presidential election coming up. And so that has national implications, but here where I am in Chicago, we are in the process of doing early voting, and there's a referendum that is on the ballot here called Back Home Chicago, which the idea of it seems very simple on its face, right? That we have a huge problem of homelessness and home insecure people in the city. And if we tax the transfer tax, the real estate transfer tax for properties that are over $1 million, we can raise enough money to create sustainable housing for people who are unhoused right now. Now that seems like, to me, a no-brainer, right? But it's being challenged in court. And so all of the votes that we will vote during this election cycle on that matter that has overwhelming public support, it will be sequestered. waiting for the challenges from the real estate industry against that ballot. Now, democracy to me means that the will of the people and the voice of the people speaks. That's a direct challenge here in Chicago.
Willa, we've got amazing things coming up in the chat. I'm
Yeah,
going to read
I see these.
before we take them to the next step. Challenge on information and truth, overpowering political mafias, the militarization and tourismization of space versus indigenizing spaces, misinformation, increased polarization, capitalism, extremism, disinformation, famine mindset, politicization and polarizing of the education system, fragmented groups, marginalized populations, very few spaces where multiple perspectives that share different truths can live in community with one another, and they often live in conflict with one another. That is a good one, actually, to sort of go on to the brainstorm prompt. Do you want to assign them that prompt as we send them into breakouts, or do you want me to keep going?
So we would love for you, we're going to put you in small breakout groups for about 7 minutes, and we would love for you to think about how would you take some of these challenges that you've just written about and get to questions, not answers, but questions that you would ask residents in your community in a listening session space.
And we
are
should
always
say,
really interested in the questions. Go ahead, Michael.
yes. No, that's right. That's right. Thank you. Because what's important to us is when we led the cohort through the process, what we kept focusing on was how is the library a site for listening and dialogue? How is the library a site for residents to come together and to creatively be invited into conversation, which has to start with listening to residents and helping residents listen to each other. So we're not asking you to come up with activities or structures or anything. Just what are the questions that you would ask that would invite residents to think about these democracy challenges? Not leading questions, not, why is Donald Trump crazy? Not that as a question. That's a leading question, although it's fair. But questions that you'd want to listen to people about. So here come the breakout room invitations, I believe. And you're going to come back in 7 minutes from your breakout group with some questions that you're going to be able to put in the chat for us to go to the next place.
Okay, we are ready to go.
Here come the breakout rooms. Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you,
Sure.
Pablo.
Sure.
So if you're still on here, we're inviting you to accept an invitation to a breakout room and join a small group. There's Peter. Pablo, do you have the ability to help move Peter into his room?
Yes, I was moving someone. Let me see. Give me just 1 second. Peter.
Hi, Peter. Might be frozen.
I think he may be frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't appear.
Eric, you're on mute.
On a sign.
Oh, there he goes.
He sometimes has connectivity problems. Cool. Way to get it off to a jump start. Woo.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Good energy. Love it.
How often have you been doing these?
Every month.
It's amazing, first of all, to see the international flavor of it, but also to see, faces that I see that I haven't seen in a long time.
It's so nice.
Yeah.
The one we did last month. Do you know the organization Narrative 4?
No.
A beautiful. I think we've got it on our website now. The session, but they use story exchanges, both in conflict situations and just for community building around the world, and they have a really enormous footprint of using this very simple story exchange technique of tell your story to a partner, then tell your partner's story to a larger group, and they get just amazing results. So anyway, looks like we may be doing some partnering with them in Asia as a result of this.
Oh, that's incredible. Where are they based?
I think their main office is in the US, I think.
Huh.
It's narrative 4 with the number 4.
Number 4. Okay.
Yeah,
You know, they
I,
actually,
oh,
years
sorry,
and
Willa.
years and years ago, there was a project at NYU, a summer project where they bought. It's so interesting to think about this at this particular time. They brought Palestinian and Israeli youth together for the summer to tell stories and to work
Peace
together.
camp. Wasn't it the peace camp that Sonia did?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, all this work we do, and then we just keep repeating the mistakes
No
of the
kidding.
past, right?
Yes.
Do you want us to, would it be helpful for us to pop around to rooms, or should we just
If
stay
you're
here and let them
curious,
go at it?
you're more than welcome to if you're curious.
I am curious. Is there,
Willa,
yeah,
before you go, when they come back, do you want to take them into sort of sharing out some of those questions, and then I can do the transition into the next step, or do you want to reverse that?
yeah, let me do that.
Okay.
And then you transition into the next step.
Okay.
Do we want them only to put them in the chat, or do we want a couple of people to just share very quickly?
I leave to you, whatever you feel.
And I asked that of Eric, just being conscious of time.
It looks like we're pretty good on time. So if you want to dedicate, like if you see something in the chat that looks really juicy, you can just call out that person and ask them to speak up.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Okay. Do you want me to move you to a room, Willa?
Sure. Can you move me first to whatever room Lynn Pace Green is in?
Okay. Yeah. Here you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not going to go around because there's only a couple minutes left, and I don't want to interrupt anybody. So
Yep. And you're so scary. It could
I'm
really
very scared.
right.
Very
Yeah.
scared. Yeah. Very scared. Yeah. It is a really neat group. It's from all over. It's a really amazing community.
There's one treat for me in this group. My sister showed up,
Who's your sister? What's her name?
Amy Miller.
Okay. You didn't know she'd be here?
No, she doesn't come to these things. They're really cool.
What's she doing here, do you think?
I think she just was turned on by the topic. She's a writer and so she's just super excited about it.
Eric's sister is here. He didn't know she was coming. Yeah, super cool. That's awesome, Eric. That's neat.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's the first one of these she ever showed up for.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
I mean,
That's cool.
it's really, I think certainly in this country where we've taken democracy for granted for so long, people are finally starting to hopefully recognize that it's something that we cannot take for granted, in the same way that we cannot take for granted clean water, and that people are starting to really think about the challenges that we're seeing, especially in this election year. I hope that translates, of course, into, voting.
Yeah.
But
I think one of the nefarious appeals of Make America Great Again is let's go back to a time when we didn't have to be conscious about things.
Yep.
Oh, of course.
Have to think about all these responsibilities.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's the racism right at the heart of it. I mean,
That's right. Of course.
absolutely. Yeah. We should probably call him back in like a minute and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Now it's 15 seconds or something. Angie,
okay.
welcome. People are just coming back from a breakout group.
Oh, great. Okay, well, I'm going to just leave to
people
you.
are coming back?
Well, they
Yes.
should. It looks like.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yep.
Okay, they're in their 30-second call.
Now they're talking really fast out there.
Yeah.
They are. Hi, Jeff. It's good to see you. Here they come. Time's almost up.
How many sentences can we interrupt in
Yeah,
one?
exactly.
Welcome back, everyone.
I know 7 minutes is not a lot of time, and just from groups that I popped around to, I know you were having incredible conversations about this question of challenges to democracy. We would love for you to put, we would love to just try to encapsulate in a few words what you discussed in terms of thinking about questions that you would ask community members in your community about that. And so if you can just list those in the chat, that would be great. In the same way that we listed the challenges, what are now some of the questions that you would want to ask residents in a session? Oh, nice. That's amazing. Where do you get your news? You know, that's such an interesting question, Amy, because I've been listening for the last couple of days here in Chicago. NPR has been doing a story about the decimation of local news and hyperlocal news sources. And so that's a really interesting question to think about. Where do you not feel listened to? That's a lovely way of. Alana, can you talk about that if you would, please, if you feel comfortable? Just
Sure.
unmuting yourself and talking about that.
Yeah, no problem. I was actually jotting down notes for our whole group. So this consisted of me, I believe it was Nikki and Peter and our communal efforts. But Nikki, did you want to speak? You started with where do you not feel listened to? I think I can speak if you don't want to. Okay, so
sorry, I'm
audio.
on my phone. I'm having trouble unmuting. Hi everyone. Yeah, I was just thinking about. I mean, it's just kind of what are the spaces there? It's ledge session right now in Honolulu, throughout I think the U.S. And so just thinking about like what bills are coming up that are kind of denying people's perspectives, and so just thinking about like I'm coming at it from that way of like, where do you not feel heard? But then on a micro level, in terms of community spaces, what are certain things that we're not feeling heard to get them out, and then kind of going from there.
You know, I hope I am pronouncing your name right. Studio. What's your most important need? That's a question actually that we always sort of put to the side, right? But please, can you speak a little bit more about that?
I think the central thing is to start with the needs of the individual, you know, inside of his reality of community, of country, of whatever it is. And the most important needs are actually something which can guide, you know, like immediately the contact, the approach, it develops also the right attitude towards the person. You know, if you have questions like that, then you put your own needs maybe a little bit behind, you know, your own goals with your project or whatever you have. And that allows you then to really access and have a true access to the person. And that's a good start, I think, also for when you search for truth, when you search for community building and etc.
That's amazing. You know, so many of the comments are about information and identity, which I think really leads us right into our next breakout session. Michael?
Yes, friend. All right. So in a moment, we're going to go back into those same breakout rooms with a different assignment. So you spent some time coming up with these incredible questions, and those questions were questions to be in a space, in a library with residents so that we could listen to them respond to those questions. So here's the next prompt. I'm putting it in the chat. Basically, we want to ask you in your group, to brainstorm, how would you come up with one way as a group that you would use creative practice to make space for one of those questions to be asked and explored in a library? So if you were to choose one of the questions you came up with a group, not all of them, just one of them, pick one, what kind of creative activity or practice would you deploy in a library space, open room or who knows, maybe you can think about a library space one of you is familiar with, and you would do something creative to get a conversation about that question going. So when you come back as a group, each group is going to have one idea for one creative practice that you could use to engage a room of residents in a conversation in a library about this important question that you have identified. And then we'll sort of see what creative ideas return to us. We'll put that in the context of the project that we did. Public engagement, inquiry, creative opportunities for dialogue. Here comes your invitation, Pablo. Here we go. Got about 6 or 7 minutes to come up with one creative approach practice idea.
And then we'll see you back here.
We'll see you right back here. You might have a lot of ideas across you, so it's a collaboration exercise a little bit as well, finding one. Few more people. We got Christopher. We have Onyika or Onyika.
Yeah,
And
Christopher said he was having some connectivity problems.
Okay.
So Eloko is alone. Or there, Christopher got in. Yep, everyone's got at least two.
Yep.
Do you have a chance after we hear from them to sort of put forward your learning from the first round? Like what has been most effective and stuff like that?
yes, we could share a little bit about that. Yes.
Yeah, please. I know we'll be hungry for it.
Yeah, yeah. Do we want to help these folks get to, oh, just one more person.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, we just need to munch on something.
You know, it's interesting to think about how thinking about narrative 4.
Yeah.
You know, the process of storytelling is as old as man itself, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And we have done it we do it in elaborate ways, like incredible films, you know, beautiful stage plays. But the simplest thing is sitting around is the oldest, sitting around in a circle around a fire, talking to each other. And I wonder what literacy is that, right? What is the literacy of being able to listen and talk to each other, right? Is that narrative literacy? Is it?
I mean, I think of it as a literacy necessary for civic, so a civic literacy.
Okay.
But there's also, I hear what you're saying. I mean, listening is a capacity necessary for that literacy.
Mm-hmm.
Communication, curiosity,
Empathy. Right.
So there are skills necessary for that literacy. I think of it, as a civic literacy to me.
And why civic, Michael?
To me, you started by saying, you started by saying we go back to ancient times, people telling stories, which, by the way, before the Greeks added the chorus, that was mainly a monological tradition, not a dialogical tradition.
That's right.
So, I mean, in a way, you're jumping ahead of the origin, which was storyteller around the fire, and you're saying story circle, which is I think different than how we think about the history of the teller. So I think Civic, like Greek theater, the polis, people being in dialogue through the plays and with each other, that's the first time a civic body is kind of recognized historically, at least in a Western way. And so I think about the civic as the way we get along and the structures and tools we build to help us get along. So the civic body, I think that's how I make that leap. It's a really interesting question. What do you think? What is how would you describe the literacy?
I'm not sure. And that's the, I hadn't really thought about it until just now when we were talking about, when I was reading through those incredible comments about, the challenges to democracy. And I think of, and thinking about narrative 4, much of how I know who I am is because my family told stories. They told stories about our origin stories, right? So nothing to, I mean, yes, all of that is civic, but what is at its base when we sit around a dinner table or when we sit in a bar with a group of friends and can listen and disagree, or even have the Rashomon effect, right? Where we all have experienced this, the same incident, but see it from very different perspectives and can share those. What is that literacy? Because I think that there should be a way to include that in the literacies that we talk about when we talk about financial and we talk about civic and we talk about reading and writing and we talk about all of those, that very basic skill of listening and talking to each other that we do.
Well, it's meaning making, right? It's like how we make meaning.
Right.
So it's how we make meaning. You said the word narrative. It's not quite artistic literacy, not quite communication. But are you more interested in the way we receive story and make meaning, or in our ability to synthesize and tell story on our own? With your question,
I am interested in the combination of those two. You cannot. A story is storytelling, as my friend Scott says all the time, is really weird if there's no audience, right? And so what that interplay between teller and listener, right, is part of what certainly in sort of my Black church theology would be call and response to a certain extent. So there's no just passive listening ever in terms of call and response. So what is that literacy? How can we define that in a way? Because I think you have to have that before you can even get to the civic literacy.
I hear you, but at the individual level, there's the skills necessary to do that, which we lack severely as a society, at least in this nation right now. How
did we get away from that? That's the other thing too, right? How did we get so fragmented that we got away from something that has been base to human since the beginning?
But yeah. Well, I mean, did we get away from it when we created societies that were completely based on capitalism and the accumulation of power? Because I mean, you and I, it's weird to say this in this sort of public circle, but you and I have talked about before how like this country isn't getting away from something because since its beginning, I had privileges that you didn't, right? So like we have not gotten away from good dialogue in this place. We just never had it, you know. We've had it amidst a certain set of humans, you know. Hey, Willa, when they come back, do you want to do the same thing? Do you want to do the reflection on the stuff they're bringing back? Do you want me to take that? How do you want to go?
So Eric, do you want us to have them put information in the chat, and then we talk about lessons that we learned from.
Yeah, let's deal with what they bring back. And then I think there's going to be a curiosity for your learning, your experiences.
Okay, and we have, if I'm correct, we have 20 more minutes. Is that right?
20 minutes, although call it 18 for me to
Okay.
just wrap up at the end.
So Michael, this might be as far as we can go then, if we start
I
talking
think that's right,
about
process-wise.
lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you should start, because I started the last one.
All right, I'll have them put some ideas in the chat, but because these are more complex ideas than just stories, I'll ask if 1 or 2 or 3 people want to say, give us the 30-second version of your idea.
Yeah.
Can we bring them back? Oh, there are 31 seconds. Let's close the rooms if we haven't.
And I'll just add to your earlier conversation, what the piece that narrative 4 adds complexity to your literacy question is by having the recipient then share the story publicly. So there is an act of, distillation, of meaning making, and then of presenting. And people feel very responsible and careful in the presenting. So there's another level of civic responsibility that comes in because you know you're going to be on and you're responsible for a fair representation of your partner's inner story.
Right. Well, stories are a gift, right? Every time we tell a story, especially a story about ourselves, we are giving someone a gift, a little piece of us, in a way.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back, everybody. Hey, so we want to continue to move with velocity, but also with breadth. And the velocity part is we invite you to type in the chat sort of a synthesis of like, here's a creative idea we have brought back that we might use in a library to help make a conversation happen around a question that we chose. While people are typing, perhaps someone would want to vocally sort of share with us like 30 seconds or under, so we can hear from a couple of people like, ooh, here's a creative idea that we have brought back from our time. So type away. And if somebody wants to verbally share, let's have someone share.
Yes. Hello to everyone. I will try to be really quick. In my group, we got a bit far with the discussion of what democracy means in different places and who should define what democracy is and how it defines you as a citizen. And so I shared a case study of a group of people here in Ecuador that have an initiative that is called Picnic de Palabras, Word Picnic. And so these people donated kids' books, and they go to the park every 15 days, and they lay these books on a target on the park. And so I'm gonna share some pictures because I think it's easier for you to see and easier for me to explain. This happens every 15 days in Quito, which is the capital city of Ecuador. It's an independent initiative. These are just volunteers who range from university students to professionals. Something that came in my group was the idea of defining your personality or like your character as a reader. It was difficult for me to find a word to define my existence. Who am I in this political world? And so being part of a readers community definitely gives me something that I can hold on to when the political system doesn't really work in my favor or allows me to be part of it. So this is my case study.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Thank you. Hey, I'm going to ask if folks would keep typing for another minute or two. Let's see another idea or two in the chat. And would someone else like to offer an idea that your group thought of, a creative practice idea for helping host a conversation about one of those questions in a library? What came up in your group? I know we didn't give you a ton of time, but I'm sure the conversations were rich.
Forum theater came up in the chat box.
Yep. Yes. What else? What else came up in your group?
We have the Barbie project, which was linking to this question of what is your most important need. And the Barbie project is very simple. It was actually planned one time to take place in the Rotterdam Library. which is quite big, and it's very simple. It's you invite people or whoever wants to participate to share on a brick what is the most important message she or he would like to share. And then it's integrated into sculpture, which is evolving with each participant, and which is then also forming, developing all the time with each one who is participating. So it can have inside of the library space, it can have a space with these bricks, And the project I realized in different countries already, there are about 3,000 bricks now in this sculpture, which I have here, but it can be done everywhere. And everybody can initiate or moderate or something like this.
Thank you so much. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing
I
that.
put a link and then for my
Oh,
mail.
that's great.
Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you.
it's a PDF you can download and then just read through it, and you can also get back to me if you like about it.
Thank you. Eric,
And
we are about.
if in case you do it, send some photos, please.
You got it.
Thank you.
Eric, as we go into our last few minutes, I know I'm going to pass maybe back to you to support a conversation with Willa and I and the group, but we want to really sort of thank everyone for those brief kind of group processes and the sharings. Thanks.
Yeah. And just to honor like that, you only really had like 6 or 7 minutes to come up with these
In no
amazing
time.
ideas, right? So to think about what then can be done over a longer period in your individual communities.
During that breakout, I had asked Willa and Michael if they would share a little bit about their own learning from being involved in this work. What have you seen that has seemed surprising or effective? Or what are your takeaways as you're coming to know how this work unfolds in so many different settings?
Willa, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, one of my I wouldn't say it was necessarily new learning, but certainly a concretization of what I knew in my heart was the value of sharing story and what it means to be able to hear and to share stories with one another, and how stories allow us not just to know who we are, but also who we are in a larger context in the world. And that we are often, when we tell stories, we find that we are much more similar than we are different. And so if you notice, in some ways, the whole idea of community is about sharing. And so for me, the idea of a story was something that really became apparent in all of the projects that we worked with. Michael, what about for you?
I think for me, something that stands out as a learning is the projects were most successful when we really helped the site teams lean into a co-design process where the artists were looking at what assets they brought to the table that felt most connected to the goals, and that the librarians were really thinking about outcomes in their community that felt important to them and their constituents, but they were also open to conversations with the artists that would lead to discovery. So what was least interesting was when everyone came together at the first meeting was like, let's do a mural. Or like, oh, we should do this. Like it just got to product right away. And I think a lot of us on here probably know that that basically cuts off the potential for discovery when you sort of treat it like a commission, or I guess we're going to do this product-oriented thing. So we were really pushing on process, really pushing on identifying assets, really pushing on collectively thinking about desired outcomes and public benefit, and then really slowing them down in the process and asking them to take the time to work together before they got at what they were going to do. So first it was, what are we going to address? what do we have to learn from each other? And then that will ultimately get to what we might do, but you can't start with what we're going to do. So a big learning was seeing how by slowing them down, making sure the artist focused on the assets and what was exciting to them, that we really kind of were able to get to things that were surprising to everyone and ultimately felt meaningful. So that's what's on my mind in this moment.
And that reminds me, Michael, of one of the things that was so apparent is the artist's ability to live with ambiguity, unlike unlike librarians and other people. We function in a space of not knowing often. You may learn your lines for the play, but you don't know what it's going to be like when you get in the room for the rehearsal, right? And that is what we live with, and we are very comfortable in that. And so getting certainly the librarians to understand you don't have to know everything at the beginning. You don't even necessarily have to know what the outcome is going to be. You have to trust in the process. So that was a huge learning curve for many.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a parallel to that artists live in the unknown, and not just librarians, but if you're on this call and you collaborate with local government agencies or nonprofits in general, the nonprofit structure, at least in the US, and municipal government in the US functions in an outcome and results oriented direction. And the notion of uncertainty not only is frightening, but it often puts people at odds with their supervisors, because their supervisors are looking for funding results and outcomes at the beginning of a project, not in the middle of a project. So it was really helping librarians figure out who in their system, up and down the power structure, did they need to get on board for what they're doing. So they were going to have the time for iteration and the time for discovery, and that it would not be demanded of them to know things before they actually could know things if they were going to work organically and iteratively with an artist. So the artist had to understand the pressure that the librarians and lots of folks in those spaces face, and those folks had to understand the asset that artists are. As our friend Roberto Bedoya says in Oakland, artists bring risk capital to risk-averse contexts. And that's a really important kind of layer of these collaborations.
Please put that quote in the chat.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So terrific.
Michael and Willa, can you give us a specific example or two of actual work that happened at the local level that you thought was cool?
You get to start. I'm typing.
Yeah, I really loved the project that happened in Vermilion, which was really a community that was not necessarily diverse in any ways. It was very homogenous, and their process question, their guiding question was, how do we invite a wider range of people into identifying needs and imagining actions so that we can create a community that thrives? Many of the people in that community were third, fourth, fifth generation people. And they were now seeing really being impacted by diversifying population, and they were struggling with really how to define that, and were feeling that tension. And they were also feeling in the way Michael just explained it, pressures to have an outcome from this project in a way. But what they found was the ancillary benefit of providing conversations brought people together in unexpected ways outside of the project that they created. And that was one of the really wonderful things, I think, for me, that was really affirming. What about you, Michael? Was there a favorite of yours?
That's a real no, I think the short answer is there wasn't a favorite. I was really interested in a lot of them. I guess I'm thinking a little bit about the class in Indiana and the relationship that the librarian and artist and educator had to sort of pulling apart. I mean, they really created this kind of curriculum for an undergraduate class at a university that then also connected with a university library and a community library. And there was sort of like like a combination of a theoretical looking at history and local context and histories of race and racism, and how to use the dialogues that were coming out of those kind of academic conversations to be more accessible, and use kind of artistically framed dialogues as a way to invite more people into an investigation of local history and public visioning. So I'm thinking about that one because of the different stuff it had going on.
Especially because that project was a real examination of water and issues around water. And that's something I think that you know, again, it's one of the things water, certainly in this country, we often take for granted. You know, I turn on the tap, I expect the water will be clean. We know certainly in Chicago that that is not the case. But even our neighbors, not even 30 miles away, there's a community here, Dixmoor, that is predominantly Black. I've been living in Chicago for 22 years. They have not had clean water the whole time I've been living here, right? So that even predates Flint. And we never talk about it except when there's something extreme that happens, like the main burst, and they lost all water in the whole city a couple of weeks ago. So that was a really, really interesting project too. I agree with you, Michael, about that.
Well, I'm realizing that we should probably take a moment and describe this next round.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to do that?
Yeah. So the Estée Lauder Foundation is really interested in looking at how libraries can impact the ecosystem for people returning from incarceration. And Michael and I, in particular, are interested in how a collaboration between library, artists, and a community-based organization can build a system that supports re-entry in ways that we have not seen in the past. And so we're looking for 6 to 8 libraries, community-based organizations, and artists that will collaborate with in a community of practice and a community of learning throughout the rest of this year, not to necessarily expedite a process, but to think about what the process and what the project would be for their individual communities to help welcome returning citizens back into the community in a very healthy, holistic manner.
So we're building this first cohort as like a community of practice, a design cohort over the next 9 months, and then hoping to then continue the funding from Estée Lauder to allow them plus some other sites to then implement programming after that in the year following. So that's a project we're working on now for round 2.
I know we only have a couple of minutes, but I'm curious, Eric, if anybody has any questions for us.
Well, for better or worse, Michael put your email in
Oh,
the
perfect.
chat box, so you may get some questions, whether we
That's
don't
perfect.
really have time to delve into them here, and I don't want to be disrespectful of just some quick response on people's parts. So let's take advantage of Michael's generosity. And if people do have questions, you can take it right to Michael and Willa. I'm going to sort of round us out here. I'll end up with one final thanks for you two, but I want to remind our participants here, you can contact ITAC. You can go to the website. You should see the resources and all the action. We have recordings of previous think tanks. We have one every month. And a reminder about ITAC 7, our biennial conference, going to be held in New Zealand. There are the contact information for the upcoming ITAC 7 in September. Sounds pretty amazing. And a reminder that next month's think tank will happen on March 25th, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 9 p.m. in Indonesia, where it's coming from. And ITAC climate artist Abner Delina will share his ITAC project of Social Actions Community Leadership Arts Workshop, training a grassroots climate action and personal development training program that cultivates young artist leaders. So that is next March 25th. And if you stick with us, you'll get lots of reminders about the time and the link. So, Michael, Willa, everybody, thank you for joining us. You know how to reach us now if you have follow-up questions. And special thanks to Michael and Willa for the beautiful work. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for having us today.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye. Bye bye.